I'm here with,
Louisiana.
all right, and similar to Jeff Brand, who we just interviewed, you're also doing 2 talks at the CodeCamp this weekend. The first talk that you're doing is based on gaming and XNA, right?
Mm-hmm. It's an inversion of control in the XNA framework.
Okay, so why is that significant? Why would somebody want to know about this?
Well, a lot of times when you're doing XNA, what ends up happening is you have a lot of one-offs, and you develop all of this product knowledge, but you can't actually leverage it in your next game. And so using inversion of control, you can build a core framework and then just pile all the new game content on top of that.
Okay.
And so in my talk, we go through a typical approach to making a simple game.
Mm-hmm.
And then I import that into an IOC library. And then by changing 3 lines, I have a completely different game.
Oh, okay.
So it's a really powerful approach to managing content in a game engine.
Okay. Now, I'm gonna go here because I was at Build where there was some disappointing insights into the future of XNA, so to speak. And I don't follow XNA that closely, but I'm kind of curious as to what your take is on XNA and maybe where it's headed in the future, especially with Windows 8 somewhere on the relatively immediate horizon.
My gut feeling is that they're going to be migrating kind of more into a Silverlight realm.
Okay.
Because the things that Microsoft has been using XNA for typically are more hobbyist types of approaches, and you can't, like, doing a full game inside XNA is near difficult to impossible. I mean, you kind of have to approach C++ and DirectX for that kind of thing.
So it makes simple stuff really simple, maybe some of the harder stuff simpler, but if you want to do some really advanced stuff, it's almost becoming detrimental in a way.
Yeah, it's almost impossible.
Okay.
And so if they're going to try to use this as a response to Flash, for example, perfect for that. Port it into Silverlight, because Silverlight has access now with Silverlight 5.
Yep.
And you can do pretty much everything that Flash can do.
Okay.
But
Okay.
you no longer really need to support XNA as a framework, because most of those new libraries fall under the Silverlight heading.
Okay. Okay. And then the other talk, which is kind of a complete divergence from XNA, is WIF, the Windows Identity Framework. So what is the identity framework in a nutshell?
Well, WIF is 2nd generation of Geneva, which died, I believe, in about March of this year. And what it is it's a different way of looking at how to do identity verification and passing of identities between different websites.
Okay.
And so, let's say you have a website and our companies are partnered and we want to do a promotion together. You don't want to have all of your employees logging into your website and logging into my website. Neither do I want my employees to have 2 logins. So we set up a trust relationship over the net, and we pass credentials back and forth, allowing our employees to access either of our websites like it's, inside their native domain.
Okay. So I know you've done some work with we both work at Magenic, and I know you've done some work with some clients on it, and it sounds like it's not the easiest thing in the world to ever get configured, but that seems like security always in general.
It's kind of I had this realization yesterday that both of my talks this weekend are about doing one-off approaches to things. The problem with WIF, like from the larger community perspective, is that you cannot necessarily show an implementation because of the security rights associated therein. And so you can show the concepts, but the underlying implementation is always going to be different. You can't use CSLA because it really is like its own little boxed black box operation
Mhm.
that websites just use. And so you have to deal with the peculiarities of the trust relationship involved.
Okay.
So we have one trust relationship, so that's one aspect of it. But if I have another company that I'm sharing trust with, I have to accommodate their trust in my WIF implementation.
Mhm.
And so you quickly get into a really complicated space where if you're trying to actually pass, I guess what a lot of people call useful information,
Mhm.
you end up with massive mapping problems because, if you have John Doe in your database and I have John Doe in my database, who's to say it's the same John Doe?
Right.
Right? And so you don't want to be passing back like social security information.
Right.
And so we have to come to some agreement with how we're going to deal with that miscommunication, because it could be the same person, it might not be the same person.
Yeah.
And so you get, on top of like doing security, which is already kind of a pain, you also have to start thinking about things in a fuzzy logic perspective.
The whole notion of identity and how you really know these
Yeah.
two identities are actually the same one.
But I think it's a very relevant topic right now because NIST is coming out with, NIST and the government in general has really been, and NSA has really been pushing lately, how are we going to do national identities? And are we going to have like a company that is a national identity provider? Are we going to do that from a government standpoint? And so it's very relevant to that conversation. Like, how do we as developers deal with identity?
Yeah.
Because there's going to come a certain time, like a tipping point, where we're not going to deal with identity anymore.
Yeah.
It's going to be obfuscated from a developer's perspective, and you're going to interface with some structure or class out there that is that person's identity.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be like a RFID tag in a wrist, so every time you put your hand on a keyboard, like you are identified on that keyboard.
Yeah.
But I mean, that would keep people from, if I walk away from my machine
Yeah.
and I'm logged into, my credit company or whatever, you couldn't come in and start,
True. But then you also get the conspiracy theorists out there that start freaking out with that type of identification.
And yes, it is. It's a really, really tricky thing to manage.
Yeah,
But at the end of the day, these things are already happening around us. Some of the big buildings downtown in Minneapolis here actually have facial recognition implemented, and as you walk in, they record which stores you actually frequent. And so it's perfectly
Minority Report.
it's perfectly legal
Yeah.
because you're on their private
Right.
property.
Yep. Yep.
But now you're losing your information. Like they're gleaning that.
Right.
And you run into these problems. But if at some point we have to start a discussion, and
Figure out how to handle it.
right, and from where I'm sitting, the utility, I guess, of WIF is a really good stepping point to base that discussion.
Okay. Cool. All right. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
TwinCitiesCodeCamp.